Welcome to the Stoned Ape Podcast. I'm your host, Wes Ranson, and this is our first episode. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy what we're doing here. What better way to start a historical podcast named the Stoned Ape Podcast than to talk about the Stoned Ape Theory? I heard about the Stoned Ape Theory a little while back and have always wanted to learn more about it, but until now I never really had a reason or something to push me to do it. All I knew is that it is a theory, or really hypothesis, that the spike in human brain expansion was caused by humans coming into contact and eating hallucinogenic mushrooms. After reading Terrance McKenna's book, Food of the Gods, I've come to find out that's exactly what it is. Of course, like everything in life, or in the world essentially, there are more layers to it than just described, but before we jump into it and see how psychedelic drugs could have been the tool used by early hominids to reach a higher form of consciousness, let's get high. Today, I'm going to be smoking Blue Dream Stizzy 40. They come in a little jar. There are 5 half-gram joints in here. It says mine THC is 46.56%. They are keef-infused joints. And let's learn a little bit about Stizzy. Stizzy, they have dispensaries in California and Michigan, and they sell products here in Arizona. They're known as, pretty much top tier. It is a little bit higher than top tier, because it's not just normal bud. It is that infused bud. But they also sell pods. They have their own form of a vape pod, and they have batteries that go with it. They sell extracts. They sell flower by itself, which I haven't seen here in Arizona. And they also sell edibles, which I haven't seen either. But again, I'm smoking the Blue Dream strain, so let's learn a bit about Blue Dream. So Blue Dream is a sativa-leaning cultivar with widespread recognition across California's cannabis landscape. Known for its approachable profile and deep roots in the West Coast genetics, it continues to hold a strong presence among curated lineups and experienced enthusiasts. It says the terpenes are myrcene, pinene, caryophyllene, and terpenoline, whatever those are. And a little bit more about the Blue Dream strain. Most consider Blue Dream to be a sativa-dominant hybrid, although its balanced lineage brings in characteristics from both sides of the genetic spectrum. Grown from blueberry indica and haze sativa, Blue Dream tends to develop approachable, well-rounded traits that many enthusiasts appreciate. Depending on cultivation techniques and phenotype selection, Blue Dream may represent slightly different expressions. Some cuts lean more towards sativa growth habits, while others lean more towards the hybrid or indica. The buds often develop a rich green color, accented by hints of blue or purple when grown in cooler climates. Dense trichome coverage gives the flowers a frosty appearance, and bright pistils weave throughout, transitioning from vivid orange to amber as harvest approaches. All right, sounds pretty good. So again, I'm going to open this up. I got 5 of these. I doubt I'll smoke all 5 of them. I don't know. Maybe I'll smoke 1 or 2 of them. But if you want to send me an email or leave me a comment, let me know what you're smoking. And maybe next time I go to the dispensary, I can try to pick that up. So I was getting kind of curious before we get this started on the Stoned Ape Theory, how 420 got started. And I found this article on PBS News that talks about it a bit. I guess most lean, and I guess from what I've found, they found that the very first usage is going to go back to a group of high school kids. They called themselves the Waldos. And it says there was a friend's brother was afraid of getting busted from a patch of cannabis he was growing in the woods. So he drew up a map and gave teens permission to harvest crops. And the story goes that during the fall of 1971 at 4:20 p.m., just after classes and football practices, the group would meet at the school's statue of chemist Louis Pasteur, smoking a joint, and head out to search for a weed patch. They never found it, but their 420 Louis later became 420. And then that's how we got 420. But one interesting thing in here that I liked, and honestly, I'm going to go with this. I don't know in timeline. I don't know when the song was released. I guess I can look a little more into this later. But there's a song from Bob Dylan called Rainy Day Women, number 12 at 35. And you guys have probably heard it. It's got the main, the main kind of hook in there is, everybody must get stoned. And he says a bunch of stuff getting stoned. But it says that 12 times 35, which is weird that I didn't know this already, but 12 times 35 equals 420. So for me, that's going to be what started it, because I don't know, maybe I'm a Dylan fan. I know he's an acquired taste, but I'm a Dylan fan. All right, so let's get into it. The Stoned Ape Theory. So he starts off, Terrance starts his book off talking about shamanism. So we're going to start out with shamanism too. Shamanism is a practice of the Upper Paleolithic tradition of healing, divination, and theatrical performance based on natural magic developed 10 to 50,000 years ago. While particular motifs may vary between cultures, shamanism's general structure is clear. The neophyte shaman undergoes a symbolic death and resurrection, which is understood as a radical transformation in superhuman condition. The shaman has access to a superhuman plane, is a master of ecstasy, can travel in the spirit realm at will, and most importantly, can cure and divine. Not all shamans use intoxicating plants to reach ecstasy, but all shamanic practice aims to give rise to ecstasy. Drumming, manipulation of breath, ordeals, fasting, theatrical illusion, sexual abstinence are all time-honored methods of entering a trance necessary for shamanic work. Yet none of these methods are as effective and ancient or as overwhelming as the use of plants containing chemical compounds to produce visions. This practice of using visionary plants intoxicants may seem alien or surprising to some. Our society regards psychoactive drugs as either frivolous or dangerous, at best reserved for the treatment of seriously mentally ill where no other effective method is available. We see the healer in the medical professional, who through the possession of special knowledge can cure. But shamanism's different. So in shamanism, if drugs are used, the shaman, not the patient, will take the drug. The motivation is also very different. The plants used by the shamans are not intended to stimulate the immune system or the body's other natural defenses against disease. Rather, the shamanic plants allow the healer to journey into the invisible realm, in which the ordinary world is replaced with the rationale of natural magic. In this realm, language, ideas, and meaning have greater power than cause and effect. Sympathies, resonances, intentions, and personnel are linguistically magnified through poetic rhetoric. Within the magical mindset of the shaman, the ordinary connections of the world and what we call natural laws are de-emphasized or ignored. For the shaman, the cosmos is a tale that becomes true as it's told and as it tells itself. A reverence for and an immersion in the powers of language and communication are the basis of the shamanic path. This is why the shaman is the remote ancestor of the poet and the artist. Our need to feel part of the world seems to demand that we express ourselves through creative activity. The ultimate wellsprings of this creativity are hidden in the mysteries of language. Shamanism strives for this higher point of view, which is achieved through a feat of linguistic prowess. A shaman is one who has attained a vision of the beginnings and endings of all things, and who can communicate that vision. And by entering the domain of plant intelligence, the shaman becomes, in a way, privileged to a higher dimensional perspective of experience. The grammars of language, their internal rules, have been carefully studied, yet little attention has been devoted to examining how language creates and defines the limits of reality. Perhaps language is more properly understood when thought of as magic, for it is the implicit position of magic that the world is made of language. The shamanic faith is that humanity is not without allies. There are forces friendly to our struggle to birth ourselves as the intelligent species. They are quiet and shy. They are to be sought, not in the arrival of alien starfleets into the sky, but nearby, in wilderness solitude, in the ambience of waterfalls, and in the grasslands beneath our feet. The Stoned Ape Theory. How did it start? The ways in which humans use plants, foods, and drugs cause the values of individuals and ultimately whole societies to shift. Eating some foods makes us happy, eating others sleepy, and still others alert. We are jovial, restless, aroused, or depressed, depending on what we have eaten. Suppression or expression of sexuality, fertility, and sexual potency, degree of visual acuity, sensitivity to sound, speed and motor response, rate of maturation, and lifespan. These are all some ways that animal characteristics can be influenced by eating plants with exotic chemistries. Human symbol formation, linguistic facility, and sensitivity to community values may also shift under the influence of psychoactive and physiologically active metabolites. Like fish in water, people in a culture swim in the virtual, invisible medium of culturally sanctioned yet artificially states of mind. Language appears invisible to people who speak them, yet they create the fabric of reality. Plant use is an example of complex language of chemical and social interactions, yet most of us are unaware of the effects of plants on ourselves and our reality. At Gombe Stream National Park in Tanzania, primatologists found that one particular species of leaf kept appearing undigested in chimpanzee dung. They found that every few days, the chimps, instead of eating wild fruit as usual, will walk 20 miles or more to a site where a species of Aspelia grew. The chimps would repeatedly place their lips over the Aspelia leaf and hold it in their mouths. They would pluck a leaf, place it in their mouths, roll it around a few times, and then swallow it whole. And they would do 20 or 30 leaves or so. Biochemist Elroy Rodriguez of the University of California at Irvine isolated the active principle in the Aspelia A radish oil, and the name I'm not going to try to pronounce, and Neil Towers of the University of British Columbia found that this compound can kill common bacteria in concentrations less than 1 part per million. Herbarium records studied by Rodriguez and Towers showed that African peoples use Aspelia leaves to treat wounds and stomach aches. Our proposed story of human emergence into the light of self-reflection is a you are what you eat story. Major climatic change and a newly broadened and hence mutagenic diet provided many opportunities for natural selection to affect the evaluation of major human traits. Each encounter with a new food, drug, or flavoring was fraught with risk and unpredictable consequences. As an example, the plants of the potential impact of a human population, consider sweet potatoes and the genus Dioscorea. In much of the tropic world, sweet potatoes provide a reliable and nutritious source of food. Nevertheless, severely closely related species contain compounds that can interfere with ovulation. These have become the source of raw materials for modern birth control pills. Apparently, a Dioscorea species of wild yam is used in birth control pills, and something of a genetic chaos would descend on a population of primates that settled into feeding upon these foods. Eating a plant or an animal is a way of claiming its power, a way of assimilating its magic to oneself. In the minds of the pre-literate people, the lines between drugs, foods, and spices are rarely clearly drawn. Somewhere along the line of our new omnivorous eating habits and our evolving brain with its capacity to process sensory data were united with the happy notion food can be experienced. Gastronomy was born to join pharmacology since maintenance of health through regulation of diet is seen amongst many animals. The strategy of early hominid omnivores was to eat everything they seemed food-like and to vomit whatever was unpalatable up. Plants, insects, and small animals found edible to this method were entered into their diet. A changing diet or an omnivorous diet means exposure to an ever-shifting chemical equilibrium. An organism may regulate this chemical input through internal processes, but ultimately, mutagenic influences will increase and the greater than usual number of genetic variant individuals will be offered up to the process of natural selection. As plants influenced the development of humans and other animals, so were the plants themselves affected in turn. Symbiosis is the relationship between two species that confers mutual benefit upon their members. The biological and evolutionary success of each species is linked and enhanced by that of the other. One example of a genetically bound and hence truly symbiotic relationship involves a small clownfish, which spends its life in proximity of certain species of sea anemones. These clownfish are protected from larger predators by the anemones, and the anemone's food supply is expanded by the clownfish, which extract larger fish into the area where the anemone are feeding. And thank you for the anemone. So what was the first encounters? The first encounters between hominids and psilocybin-containing mushrooms may have predated the domestication of cattle in Africa millions of years ago. And during this million-year period, the mushrooms were not only gathered and eaten, but probably also achieved the status of cult. But domestication of wild animals, a great step in human cultural evolution, by bringing humans into greater proximity of cattle, also increases contact with mushrooms, because these mushrooms we're talking about, they grow in cow dung. Thinking about human evolution ultimately means thinking about evolution of human consciousness. Some investigators have adopted a primarily cultural emphasis. They point to our unique linguistic and symbolic capabilities, our use of tools, and our ability to store information epigenetically as songs, arts, books, computers, thereby creating not only culture but also history. Others who take a more biological approach have emphasized our physiological and neurological peculiarities, including the exceptionally large size of the complexity of our human neocortex, a great proportion of which is devoted to complex linguistic processing, storage, and retrieval of information, as well as association with motor systems governing activities like speech and writing. By 3 million years ago, at least three clearly recognized species of proto-hominids were in place in Africa. These were Homo africanus, Homo boisei, I don't know if I said that right, and Homo robustus. Also at that time, the omnivorous Homo habilis, the first true hominid, had clearly emerged from the division of species and also gave rise to two vegetarian man-apes. The grasslands expanded slowly. Early hominids moved through the mosaic of grasslands and forests. These creatures, with brains proportionally only slightly larger than chimpanzees, were already walking upright and probably carrying food and tools between patches of forests, which they continued to exploit for tubers and insects. Their arms were proportionally larger than ours, and they possessed a more powerful grasping hand. The evolution to upright posture and the initial expansion into the grassland niche had occurred earlier, between 9 to 5 million years ago. The hominids lightly expanded their original diet of fruit and small animal kills by including underground roots, tubers, and corms. A simple digging stick would allow access to this previously untapped food source. Modern baboons on the savanna subsist largely on grass corms during certain seasons. Chimpanzees add substantial amounts of beans to their diet when they venture onto the savanna. Among chimps, baboons, and hominids, hunting appears to be a male activity, and sometimes they did it in groups. With Homo habilis began a sudden and mysterious expansion of brain size. Homo habilis' average brain size was around 770 grams, compared to 530 for competing hominids. By 750,000 to 1.1 million years ago, the new hominid type, Homo erectus, was widespread. The brain size of the new hominid was 900 to 1100 grams. Evidence is good that Homo erectus used tools and possessed some sort of rudimentary culture. At the Chakatian Cave in South Africa, there's good evidence of fire use along with burnt bones, indicating the cooking of meat. These are attributed to Homo erectus, which was the earliest hominid to leave Africa a million or so years ago. One advance of the hominid type followed another into the Africa Evolutionary Laboratory, and beginning with Homo erectus, representatives of each type radiated across the Eurasian landscape in the interglacial periods. At the end of these truly remarkable 3 million years in the evolution of human species, human brain size had tripled. Because these scientists were unable to explain the tripling of the human brain size in such a short span of evolutionary time, some early primate paleontologists and evolutionary theorists predicted and searched for evidence of transitional skeletons. Bipedalism, binocular vision, the opposable thumb, the throwing arm, all have been put forth as the key ingredient in the mix that caused self-reflecting humans phase competing hominid types. Yet all we know, competing hominid types. Yet all we know is that the shift in brain size was accompanied by remarkable changes in the social organization of hominids. They became users of tools, fires, and language. Alkaloids in plants, specifically the hallucinogenic compounds such as psilocybin or, DMT, could be the chemical factors in the proto-human diet that catalyzed the emergence of human self-reflection. The action hallucinogens present in many common plants enhance our information, processing activity, or environmental sensitivity, and this contributed to the sudden expansion of the human brain size. And the latter stage in this same process, hallucinogens acted as a catalyst in the development of imagination, fueling the creation of internal stratagems in hopes that we may have well synergized the emergence of language and religion. Humans are both attracted and repelled by substances whose tastes skirt the edge of acceptability. Foods that are highly spiced or bitter or aromatic arouse strong reactions from us. We say of such foods that one must acquire the taste for it. This is true for foods and is also true for drugs. Repetition of exposure seems to be the key of acquiring the taste, which suggests that the process is complex and involves both behavioral and biochemical adaptation. The notion we are exploring is that a particular family or active chemical compound, the endohallucinogens, played a decisive role in the emergence of our essential humanness, of the human characteristic of self-reflection. In attempting to understand which plants might have been causally implicated in the emergence of consciousness, several important points need to be kept in mind. The plant we are seeking must be in Africa, since evidence is overwhelming that the human type emerged from Africa. The African plant must be native to grasslands, as this is where our newly omnivorous ancestors learned to adapt, coordinate their bipedalism, and refine existing methods of signaling. The plants must require no preparation. It must be active in its natural state and must be continuously available to a nomadic population, easily noticed and plentiful. The plant must confer immediate and tangible benefits upon individuals who are eating it. Those requirements drastically reduce the number of contenders, because Africa has a scarcity of hallucinogenic plants. But process of elimination, we are left with basically psilocybin and DMT in the grassland environment. And this would have been too difficult to get DMT at a level to where they would actually notice, because it's a scientific process. Early hominids would not had the efficient amount of technical knowledge to basically extract it from the grass. So we're left with mushrooms at that point. When our remote ancestors moved out of the trees and onto the grasslands, they increasingly encountered hoofed beasts who ate vegetation. These beasts became a major source of potential sustenance. Our ancestors also encountered manure from these same wild cattle, and the mushrooms grew in the manure. Several of these grassland mushrooms contained psilocybin, Panialis, and Stropharia cupensis. Of these mushroom species, only Stropharia cupensis contains psilocybin in concentrated amounts and is free from nauseating producing compounds. So Stropharia cupensis was probably what it was. And that has been found in a place called Nan Nak Ta, dating back to 15,000 BCE. This suggests mushroom use was a human trait that emerged wherever human population and cattle evolved together. Nature appears to maximize mutual cooperation and mutual coordination of goals, to be indispensable to the organisms which one shares the environment with. This is a strategy that endures successful breeding and continued survival. It is a strategy in which communication and sensitivity to signal processing are paramount. These are language skills. The idea that nature might be an organism whose interconnected compounds connect upon the communication with one another through the release of chemical signals into the environment is only now beginning to be studied. Psilocybin's main synergetic effects seem ultimately to be in the domain of language. It excites vocalization. It empowers articulation. It transmutes language into something that is visibly beheld. It could have had an impact on the sudden emergence of consciousness and language use in early humans. We literally may have eaten our way to a higher form of consciousness. It is important to note that some of the most powerful mutagens in the natural environment occur in molds and fungi. Mushrooms and cereal grains infected by molds may have led to a major influence in animal species, including primates evolving in the grasslands. All unique characteristics and preoccupations of human beings can be summed up under the heading of cognitive activities. Dance, philosophy, painting, poetry, sport, meditation, erotic fantasy, politics, and ecstatic self-intoxication. We are truly Homo sapiens, the thinking animal. Our acts are all the product of the dimension that is uniquely ours, the dimension of cognitive activity. Our thought and emotion, memory and anticipation of psyche. Human cognition is the adaptive response that is profoundly flexible in the ways it allows us to manage what in other species are genetically programmed behaviors. We alone live in an environment that is conditioned not only by biological and physical restraints, to which all species are subject, but also by symbols and language. Our human environment is conditioned by meaning, and meaning lies in the collective mind of the group. Symbols and language allow us to act in the dimension that is supernatural, outside the ordinary activities and other forms of organic life. What can actualize our cultural assumptions, alter and shape the natural world in the pursuit of ideological ends, and according to the internal model of the world that the symbols that we have empower us to create. We do this through the elaboration of ever more effective and ever more destructive artifacts and technologies which we feel compelled to use. Symbols allow us to store information outside the physical brain. This creates for us a relationship to the past very different from that of our animal companions. Finally, we must add to any analysis of the human picture the notion of self-directed modification of activity. We are also able to modify our behavior patterns based on our history. Through our ability to store and recover information as images and written records, we have created a human environment as much conditioned by symbols and language as by biological and environmental factors. At first, this amounted to the ability to shout out a warning or a command. Over the course of human history, this impulse to communicate has motivated the elaboration of ever more effective communication techniques. Our unique and feverish love for words and symbols have given us a collective gnosis, a collective understanding of ourselves and our world that has survived throughout history. Neural structures concerned with conceptualization, visualization, signification, and association are highly developed in our species. The ability to associate sounds and the small mouth noises of language. Consciousness has been called awareness and is characterized by novel associations and connections among various data of experience. It is a moment-to-moment integration of the world. The rise of globally simultaneous electronic culture has vastly accelerated the rate at which we need to obtain information necessary for survival. As a result of these changes, we ourselves have become largely epigenetic, meaning that much of what we are as human beings is no longer in our genes, but in our culture. The impact of hallucinogens in the diet has been more than psychological. Hallucinogenic plants may have been the catalyst for everything about us that distinguishes us from the other primates, for all the mental functions that we associate with humanness. And this is basically what the entire book is hypothesizing. So there are 3 steps in eating mushrooms, the 3 different levels of and what you attain when you get to that next level and how they help mankind. This is basically what he's saying. At first, there's a low level of usage. A small amount of psilocybin consumed, maybe with no awareness, would have a notable increase of visual activity, especially in edge detection. So he says you can detect edges better. Groups containing individuals with improved eyesight will be more successful at feeding their offspring. That makes sense. Because of the increase in available food, the offsprings within such groups would have a higher probability of themselves reaching productive age. And that also makes sense if it does help your eyes in that way. Because psilocybin is a stimulant of the central nervous system, when taken in slightly larger doses, it tends to trigger restlessness or sexual arousal. So this will be the second level. He says that by increasing instances of copulation, the mushrooms directly favored human reproduction. And at the third level, and this is the one I believe in the most, it says religious concerns would be at the forefront. The tribe's consciousness, simply because of the power and strangeness of the experience. And I can really believe that, someone that knows what they're doing and taking a large amount of mushrooms could easily, jump into that, and see things that aren't there or see things that are there in a different way. So in conclusion of this book, or the theory or hypothesis, I guess, there are several other interesting things, that Terrance brings up. It wasn't super important to the narrative, but I figured I'd share them anyway. I thought they were interesting, like the story of Genesis being a story of a woman who is mistress to a magical plant. She eats and shares the fruits of the tree of life, or the tree of knowledge. At a metaphorical level, they had attained consciousness of themselves as individuals and each other as other. He talks about other drugs human beings have created and used, from alcohol to cannabis. Interesting about cannabis, the Scythians, a nomadic Central Asian barbarian group who entered Eastern Europe around 700 BCE, are the people who brought the use of cannabis to Europe. Herodotus describes their novel method of self-intoxication, a kind of cannabis sweat lodge. Without pipes, there really wasn't an effective way to smoke, though they did realize inhaling cannabis was the best way to enjoy it. And of all the pandemic plants intoxicants inhabiting the earth, cannabis is second only to mushrooms in its promotion of the social values and sensory ratios that typified the original partnership societies. Because of its subliminary psychedelic effects, cannabis, when pursued as a lifestyle, places a person in intuitive contact with less goal-oriented and less competitive behavior. And for myself, that actually explains a lot. Terrance talks about sugar, coffee, and tea, from cocaine to opium. He mentions all types of ways we have separated ourselves from the drugs that really made us who we are. He believes that mushrooms were the special ingredient for everything we are, and I appreciate him putting ideas like this into our minds and into the universe. I personally believe that taking psychedelics could absolutely have an effect on an individual, but I don't believe there is evidence that it could be so strong it could actually change our DNA. I also wonder, since there are other primates that eat hallucinogenic mushrooms, why haven't we seen an expansion in their minds and abilities? I believe there are over 100 species of primates that eat mushrooms today. Also, I've taken mushrooms several times recreationally, and I can't say that there's been one time that I felt that I could see better, especially my phone, or I couldn't tell you a time I wanted to have sexual intercourse. I never heard of people having shroom orgies, but it's a strange world out there, so it's probably happening. Just a few holes I personally see in this hypothesis, but I believe it could have a strong effect on how we bond as a culture for sure, and religious beliefs. At the end of the day, it is really a stoned ape hypothesis and not a true theory. There isn't a good way to know how much psychedelic mushrooms our distant ancestors might have ingested, and apart from artwork with mushroom shapes in it seems a daunting task. Of course, I'm no scientist, and technology is constantly advancing. Maybe one day we'll find out hallucinogens played an important part in the culmination of mankind. And that's all we have for you guys today. Thanks for tuning in. If you have something to say, leave us a comment or send us an email to stonedapepod@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook at the Stoned Ape Podcast with Wes Ranson, or at YouTube, youtube.com/@thestonedapepod, and we'll have links down below. Thanks again, and have a chill day.